Good morning, everyone. Good to see you, and thank you for everyone who was participating. One thing that we didn't highlight from Link was that we've recently got T-shirts, and I left mine at home. It's up hanging in the cupboard. But we have a few people here with their T-shirts on. Margaret, would you like to stand up and model? And Jack, stand up and let people see your T-shirt with Link on the front, and turn around, and on the back, Millgrove Baptist Church. So it's something to stride about. Voices in the Streets is the title that I've given this message. A highway patrolman pulled alongside a speeding car on the highway. Looking at the car, he is absolutely astounded to see that the elderly woman behind the wheel was knitting. The policeman cranked down his window and yelled to the driver, "Pull over!" "No," the woman yelled back, "Cardigan." We hear all sorts of voices in the streets. Thank you, Heather. Anyone recognise that photo, where it is? How many people have been there in the last week? Put your hand up. How about that? Okay, a whole heap of you have been there. Jesus spent a large proportion of his time listening and ministering to people in the streets. I don't know about every time I go down to Yarra Junction supermarket, I'll bump into Alfred sitting there having a cup, David having a cup of coffee, he just is constantly there, and Gordon is competing for time down there, I think, as well. Is that your experience as well? Yeah, okay. I think you can go down there into Woolworths and you'll meet somebody from our church just about every time. Has that been your experience? It's mine as well. So sit in the coffee shop at Yarra Junction for 7 days a week and you would meet, I reckon, just about everyone in the valley if you sat there for that period of time. If Jesus came to the Yarra Valley today, he'd be having coffee in Woolworths Open Plaza every day. Just for that reason, that he would meet everyone in our community over a course of a week or two. You know, we should have a roster of our people sitting down there having coffee. Anyone like to join the roster? We already have them. Okay. David and Gordon and Alfred are sitting where Jesus would sit. Isn't that something? A brief overview of Matthew chapters 1 to 10 is I've got up on the screen. Matthew, the first 10 chapters of Matthew, is designed to tell us about Jesus. Chapter 1 to 2, Jesus' arrival. Chapter 3, Jesus' call to ministry. Chapter 4, Jesus calls his disciples. Chapter 5 through to 7, Jesus teaches his disciples how to live. That's the Sermon on the Mount. Chapters 8 and 9, which we're going to look at today, Jesus shows his disciples how to minister to people. And then chapter 10, Jesus sends his disciples out into the world to share him. These chapters can be taken as a personal challenge this morning to you and to me. Chapter 4, Jesus calls his disciples. The question is, have you heard Jesus call to you to follow him? Chapters 5 to 7, Jesus teaches his disciples how to live according to the kingdom of heaven. The question is, are you and I living as Jesus has asked us to live? In chapters 8 to 9, Jesus shows his disciples how to minister. Are you ministering to people in the way that Jesus ministered? Are you ministering to people that Jesus ministered to? There are two questions which I'd like to challenge you with this morning. Jesus attended the churches of his day, the synagogues and the temples. But from these two chapters in Matthew's Gospel, it is obvious that he spent most of his time in ministry out in the community. Out on the streets of Nazareth and the city of Capernaum and the city of Jerusalem. I called this message Voices on the Streets. Jesus placed himself out in the streets and heard the voices of common people of his day. Matthew chapter 8 and verse 1 to 4, a leper comes to Jesus. A leper was a person who, like the last year or two, we've avoided people because we haven't wanted to catch the virus that they have. And we didn't want to get sick and we didn't want to die. And lepers were like just exactly that. So one of these people who was had this terrible disease, and people were afraid, and said to Jesus, "Sir, if you want to, you can cure me." A voice from the street. He says to Jesus, "Lord, are you willing?" And Jesus' response was to stretch out his hand and to touch him. And he said, "Of course I will. Be cured." Last Friday night, I was headed down to, it's a ritual in our family that we have fish and chips on a Friday night, and the whole lot of us, the 9 of us living in our place, plus David, 10, order fish and chips on a Friday night. And I regularly get the order and put it all together and make mistakes, and people miss out on their fish or whatever other. So they've got to check me each time now these days. So my maths are not very good, Mark, unfortunately. But anyway, I was heading down, I made the order, heading down to get our fish and chips for our large family. And I get a phone call. And it's for a man who calls himself Peter. And he said, "Oh, can you help me? I've just moved from Melbourne up to Heathcote, and we've moved into a house and we've got no food, and my wife and my children have got no food, and there's a Chinese place down the way. Can you pay for a Chinese food for us for tonight?" And he gave me the order. I'm a pensioner. Brigitte and I are pensioners. And life's tough at times. The money isn't all that plentiful. I said to him, "Couldn't you phone a church in your area around Heathcote, Bendigo way?" And he said, "Oh, I've been phoning all the churches and they don't answer the phone." And I wondered how he got my number, and I wiped it off the website except for men's breakfast and so on.
Did he use the church phone number?
No, he rang me. He rang me.
Because it switched through to my phone.
Okay, yeah. But he rang me and said, "Can you help?" And I'm on the way to get all this lovely fish and chips. And there's family in Bendigo or Heathcote who are wanting some food, and they've got no food. My natural response was to say, "Yeah, isn't there a church in your area?" He said, "I've tried." Are you willing, Ray? Are you willing? I need help. Are you willing? We have natural resistance, don't we, when we think all the reasons why we we shouldn't give. You know, Jesus was very human, like me. He headed off into the desert to get away from people, just to spend some time by himself. But the people followed him. Jesus still fed them, didn't he? Are you willing? Am I willing? How am I going to pay for it? I'm terrible on the website and doing things like that. How am I going to pay for this? And I said, how? Give me the name. I thought, well, maybe it's a scam or something of the sort, you know. And so he gave me the name of Dragon Restaurant, or whatever it was called. Red Dragon, I think it was called. So I got that. And I looked it up on the internet, made sure it was there, and so on. So I gave him the phone call, and the girl, I told the girl what the story was, and she said, well, we don't have the means to do it over the telephone. You know, you can't pay your card through a card over the phone. I'm terrible on the internet. We went and saw the boss, and the boss came back to me, and she said, well, you can pay it into our account. So I had to go into a bank account and transfer it and so on. I actually succeeded. I mean, God was helping me there. It actually worked. Jesus always responded to the voice on the street. He said, I'm willing. What about you? What about me? Was a foreigner, a centurion, soldier. He called out to Jesus, Lord, my servant lies at home, paralysed. Jesus' response was, I'll go and heal him. The centurion said to him, just say the word. And I'm a soldier, I tell people what to do all the time. I just tell them and they go and do it. Just say the word. Don't have to worry about coming. And Jesus said, wow, what a faith. And the man went home and his servant was healed. A Roman centurion who was the oppressor. Israel was a country that was subservient to the Romans. He was a centurion who was really the enemy. And Jesus was prepared to help him. Lots of foreigners in the Yarra Valley. I looked up at 24,000 foreigners, people who were born outside of Australia and living in the valley. 16% of people born overseas in the valley. In the from the UK, the United Kingdom, 6%, 1.2% New Zealanders. From the Netherlands, we've got some of them here, 1.1%. From Germany, we've got some here. Hello, Brigitte, born in Germany. and Alfred, you weren't born in Austria, were you? But
No.
it's almost Germany, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, it's 0.7%. Italy, 0.6%. South Africa, 0.5%. And people from China and Burma and a whole range of other countries. We're blessed to have some of these people, as I've already mentioned, Hank and Brigitte and others in our church, and we are rapt that we have them in our church. We also have people who were here before all the rest of us, Aboriginal people, and we're blessed to have Will with us as an Aboriginal person. I'm involved with the child safety abuse protection in the church and so on, and head up the committee and so on. And one of the new principles that they've asked us to apply is to make sure that Aboriginal people are welcomed in our churches, and that we recognise and respect their culture and their way of living in our church. So we're a disparate community, aren't we? A whole lot of people from a whole range of different things. Jesus said of the centurion, "Nowhere in all of Israel have I found faith like this." Faith isn't just found in church, but in the most unlikeliest of places. A Roman soldier, the enemy, a foreigner. We as a church are being taught by Jesus to listen to the voices in the street and listen and to respond to them. Have you the patience to understand someone struggling with English as a second language? Are you prepared to adjust to another culture, another way of doing things? Could it be possible that someone from a different culture and religion could have a very deep faith? Or hear Jesus' voice? Mark was mentioning today the Muslims, Buddhists, who assist us with the programs that we run. Jesus was open to people from different cultures and responded to them. Another voice which Jesus heard on the street are those who are out of control. And the story on this one is that two men were running berserk. And Jesus obviously came close to them or approached them. And they said, "What do you want with us, Son of God? Have you come to torture us?" Jesus' response was to speak to the demons and tell the demons to go, to get lost. You see, whether it's a psychological illness, or addiction to alcohol or to drugs, it's the same today as it was in Jesus' day. There are people who are out of control, out in the streets. And they are voices that are crying out for help. Although sometimes it doesn't seem like it. I think of Debbie's story. Debbie first came to our church to a link program, to our Second Bite program on a Friday morning. I remember talking to her the first time I spoke to her, just down by the servery, having a cup, as we'd sit around and have couples together. She said, I'm needing something to keep me occupied, something to do. And so I suggested that she might like to volunteer at Benmore Op Shop. And she went down and volunteered down there. And Brigitte said she did more talking than what she did working. But that's what she needed. See, a voice on the street. And we listened as a church. And we welcomed her into our community. And we shared through Alpha and other programs who Jesus was. And she responded to Jesus, and she gave her life to Jesus in our church and was baptised in our church. Became a part of us. The voices in the streets are sometimes out of control. Jesus calls us to minister to them. My first full-time church at Belmont Heighton was a sea captain, a Brethren background, and he'd gone to sea and had his first drink, and he said right from that time he knew that he was an alcoholic. We were just there, Brigitte and I, in the manse, and a month or so, and we hear this voice calling out about 1 o'clock in the morning, "Ray, Ray!" And go out there in my PJs, and there he is rolling on the lawn, absolutely full. Voices in the streets took him off to hospital. Jesus had time for people who were out of control. You and I are commanded or asked, challenged, to work with those people and tell Satan to go. Because that's the reason why they are aware, because they're controlled by Satan. To have compassion, to have love, and to give of ourselves to those people who most of all need it. Voices on the streets, the story, the cure of a paralytic man, a person unable to walk, carried in by his friends to see Jesus, not able to even speak for himself, and they asked Jesus to heal him. And Jesus asked him, or it says, tells the man his sins are forgiven. It was the opposite of what anyone else wanted. That started controversy. Who can forgive sins? How come you're forgiving sins? Only God can forgive sins. And then Jesus commands the man to walk. And he picks up his bed and walks home, and people are struck with awe. We had a call from Link to visit an elderly man and his wife in Millgrove. Ken was his name. He was looking for food. He lived in an old house, dark and cluttered. And when I knocked at the door and delivered the food, he shuffled in, and a long hallway, and it was terribly dark and very damp, and can you carry the food in for me, and carry the food in and into the kitchen area, and there's stuff covering every surface you could possibly imagine, and this old man with his dressing gown on and his PJs. And I delivered food every week for a couple of years to that guy. And Elizabeth organised it. In winter it was always freezing cold. He had a fireplace, but oftentimes ran out of wood, and we got wood at different times, and sometimes his son would help him. Intermittently, he'd be off to the hospital. Every time I'd go and visit him, he'd always talk to him about he had a bag, which all that sort of stuff, and it caused a lot of pain when he had to have it inserted and all that sort of thing. I'd get this story all the time. I always had to phone him when I was delivering, because he wouldn't hear me knocking, so I had to ring him on the phone so he'd know that I was there. Always talking about his medical problems. But as I left, every time he would say, "God bless you, Ray. God bless you, Ray." He spent extensive times in hospital, and I would call him and keep in touch. And eventually told me he was selling his home and going to move to an aged care home. The last time I spoke to him, I didn't actually contact him, he rang me. He was so excited. He said, we've moved into the aged care place, and we both have a room each, and a beautiful bathroom, and our meals come to us regularly prepared all the time. And Ray, he said, I'm warm. I'm not cold anymore. You and I are called to care for the people, to listen to the voices that are on the streets. Then there's the story of Matthew. Jesus saw a man named Matthew. And he walked up to him and said, "Follow me." And Matthew got up and followed Jesus. And went to his home, and all the other tax collectors were there and so on, and had a meal together. And Jesus got criticised. Fancy having meals with robbers and thieves. And Jesus' response was, it's those who are healthy who don't need a doctor, but those that need a doctor are those who are sick. I came to call sinners, Jesus said. We've run alpha courses for people, voices on the streets. Each year we had run a course. We chose to invite people who have come to Second Bite or trivia nights in our church. One of the stories from Alpha, the Alpha series, was Shane Taylor. He was a thief, a robber, stole cars, involved in fighting, and he actually stabbed someone. Full of anger and full of hatred, he attacked a prison officer when he was put into prison. And in prison, the chaplain met him and he argued with the chaplain. And the chaplain told him about Jesus and prayed for him. And Shane, in his cell that day, said to God, God, if you're real, come into my life. And there was this emotional feeling, he said, that came over him, and then tears, and he sobbed. And suddenly God was real for him. And he helped with Alpha in the prison. And when he got out, he started to work in the prison. And he met a beautiful lady, and they married and had children. And he said, the best gift of all is that I've met Jesus. I now have a life, a beautiful wife, and 4 kids. Are you listening to the voices in the streets? Jesus did. He even confronted people like Matthew. There's a story of the official whose daughter had just died, and he came up to Jesus and asked for his help. And Jesus went back to the home, and there was a funeral happening and grieving process in the house, and he cleared the room. He says to the dad, can you just imagine it? Said to the dad, she's not dead, she's just sleeping. And he took her by the hand and she stood up. Jesus brought hope to a dad who had no hope. To be there for people who grieve and have no feeling that there is a future for them. To pray for a miracle for them. To extend our hands to hold their hand and to offer comfort. And then there's a story of the 2 blind men who came to Jesus and they said, have pity on us. And Jesus said to them, do you believe that I can help? And they answered, we do. And Jesus touched their eyes. Your faith deserves it, he said, so let it be done for you. And their sight returned. I'd just like to take a moment to go and sit with Alfred. Hi, Alfred.
Hello, Ray.
Is everyone here?
Yes.
Okay. Alfred, how did you first become in touch with us as a church?
I think it was Tanya at the time encouraged me to come and participate. Yeah.
Okay, so where did that happen?
Here at the church, yeah. Oh, Second Bite, perhaps. Oh, no, actually, it might have been at the market.
Okay.
That, yeah.
Okay, what happened at the market?
We started chatting and introduced ourselves and, yeah. Said she was a parishioner here and, yeah, parishioner to come along. Yeah.
Okay, and so why did you come?
Many different reasons, I guess. Yeah, being local and that sort of thing. Yeah, and to find out all I could and yeah, be part of the church. Yeah.
And what do you think of it?
I love it. It's great. Yeah, it's a good community group. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are you doing now?
A few things. I'm volunteering for Link as one, and I've got my other bits and pieces going, maintaining my home, and I get a little bit of help there, and yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I was actually thinking that when the dad lost his daughter in that passage that we did just before. That's why I thought of you at the time, because you lost somebody too.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Who was that?
My mum. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. First October last year. Yeah.
Yeah. And you were close with her.
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. And were as a church able to help you at all in that area?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
We enjoy having you each month or so to our place for a meal.
Thank you.
And for our program. Yeah, but we love having you, mate.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And thank you for what you were doing.
It's okay.
Ray,
Yeah.
we had the privilege of meeting Alfred's mum a couple of times, and she was a lovely lady, so we know where Alfred got it from.
Okay. There you go.
Okay.
I'd just like to summarise the voices in the street, the people who Jesus confronts and helps in these 2 chapters in Matthew. The leper, the untouchables, the centurion, who was the foreigner, the demon-possessed men who are out of control, the paralysed man who is disabled, the taxman, the crook, the sinner, the ruler, the grieving dad, and the blind man in the dark, spiritually as well as physically. This to me, and hopefully for you too, is a challenge for us to be involved in our community so that we can hear the voices who are on the street. You live as a church and are called to minister to the people in your streets and your cafes in the same way that Jesus did. With love and compassion, being willing, being generous, being open, grace, offering grace and kindness and forgiveness to people, offering hope where there is no hope, and providing a challenge where people need to be challenged as well. The passage ends with these words, and when Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. And then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. I want to ask the question that first man asked Jesus, that leper. Are you willing? And Jesus said, of course I'm willing. I want to give that challenge to you. I know so many of you do so many things, but the question is, are you willing to listen to the voices on the streets, in the supermarket, in our towns and in our valley? Are you willing to challenge, to confront, to bring healing, to bring love, to bring compassion? We don't need committees so much. We don't need deacons. We're going to ask for some money to help in a little while, in a little moment. But it's not so much about money. It's about being out there and being willing and asking Jesus to go with us. Perhaps we could read that passage that I just read then in a slightly different way. And when Millgrove Baptist Church saw the crowds, they had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless. like sheep without a shepherd. And they said to each other, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. And they went. God bless you. Amen.